What if a prenup could be the foundation for a healthier, more honest relationship? For most people, the term prenup brings up fear, conflict, or shame. But in this episode, we're flipping the script. I'm joined by family dynamics coach Emily Bouchard to explore how conversations around prenups, and money in general, can build connection, trust, and clarity in relationships of all kinds, not just new marriages. We'll talk about why the real issue isn't the prenup itself. It's how the conversation is handled, and how childhood stories and money habits quietly shape our partnerships. If you've ever struggled to talk about money with someone you love, this episode is for you. Welcome to the Death Readiness Podcast. This is not your dad's estate planning podcast. I'm Jill Mastroianni, former estate attorney, current realist, and your guide through wills, trusts, probate, and the conversations no one wants to have. If your Google search history includes, "Do I need a trust? What exactly is probate? And am I supposed to do something with mom's will?" You're in the right place. I once represented a woman, I'll call her Megan, whose husband Mike died suddenly and tragically right in front of her. I never met Mike, but through Megan's stories, I felt like I had. She loved him very much. On the morning of their wedding, while getting her hair done, Megan was handed a prenuptial agreement to sign. She didn't want to rock the boat. She loved Mike, so she signed it. What she didn't realize was that by signing, she gave up her right to inherit anything if Mike died. Neither of them expected that to matter anytime soon. But just a couple of years later, Mike died unexpectedly, and he hadn't updated his estate plan since his first wife passed away. I'm sure he meant to, but he didn't. Now, yes, a prenup presented and signed on the wedding day might not hold up in court, but the last thing Megan wanted was to battle the estate of the man she loved and missed. Megan's loss and the aftermath could have been so much gentler if she and Mike had talked openly about money, expectations, and the future before they got married, before signing a prenup. That's exactly the kind of conversation today's guest, Emily Bouchard, encourages us to have. Whether or not a prenup is contemplated, conversations about money before and during marriage matter. They're not one and done. They're ongoing. Emily is the co-author of The Beginner's Guide to Purposeful Prenups, and I'll include a link in the show notes to obtain a free digital copy. Let's get started. Well, hi, Emily. Thank you very much for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Hi, Jill. I'm so delighted. I've been really looking forward to it too.
So I do have experience with prenuptial agreements. As an attorney, I drafted them, and I never considered the conversations that were happening outside of my office between my client and the client's fiance. And it wasn't until I read your book about purposeful prenups that I realized that there was probably some relationship damage occurring outside my office doors. And not that I would have ever introduced those conversations because I'm not trained in that way. But I wish, looking back, that I had invited somebody like you into the conversation to help the couple start off on a solid foundation for marriage. I loved your book in the beginning that you referenced the Seinfeld episode because I know that I had seen it when I was growing up. And then I watched it again on YouTube, just that little clip where George is trying to get out of marrying Susan. And do you want to maybe say what the advice is?
Yeah, and it's great that it's on YouTube so you can just see this one clip. So whether you've ever watched Seinfeld or not, it's just a very clever little clip where the goofy friend of George's, Kramer, says, "You really want to get out of this marriage? You really don't want to get married to Susie?" He's like, "Yeah, I need to get out of this." And he says, "Oh, I got 2 words for you. Prenup." And it's just hilarious. And then Elaine's like, "Yeah, I wouldn't sign one." And what's funny about the episode is when George brings it up thinking it's going to make her offended and not want to marry him, she laughs hysterically and says, "I have more than you do. No problem. I'll sign whatever you want."
Right, exactly.
So it was absurd, but it was more like, what's our cultural reference to prenups and what do we think about them? And it's got such a negative connotation in our culture. And I don't know what it is about me and taking on negative memes, but I'm a specialist in blended families and step families. And Like, try to find a positive stepmom cultural reference, right? There's just not.
They don't exist.
Right. And the same with the prenup. And so I'm on a mission to change that perspective where it can actually be one of the most grounding, foundational, most important conversations that you can be having as a couple getting married to strengthen your marriage.
And I think that there are a lot of misconceptions about what a prenuptial agreement even is and what it can control and what it doesn't control. It's not as if you sign a prenuptial agreement and they all do the exact same thing. They are contracts that are tailored to the intentions of the couple that's getting married. And a lot of times you might say, okay, well, this partner has a family business, so maybe the spouse isn't going to be entitled to the inheritance from the family business, but whatever they earn during the marriage is, fair game. So you can tailor them in any way you wish to do it. But how would you describe a prenup for somebody who has this negative connotation?
Yeah, I think when people hear it, the first thing that they think of is you're planning for divorce, right? Or you don't trust me, right? So it's all about protection and almost like you were saying, like from a legal perspective, maybe adversarial approach towards this person that you're about to get married to. And what is actually the case, and what I love to help people understand is the moment you get married, you're signing a legal contract, right? There's a marriage license. And that contract has stipulations in whatever legal jurisdiction you're in about what happens when that union ends. And the union doesn't only end with divorce, it can end with death and in some cases disability, right? Where there can be somebody who has dementia and lives for 11 years in a home, but there's no marriage really anymore except legally.
Right.
What does that look like as a couple as you navigate this world? And I mean, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but there is no happily ever after, right? We're not going to live forever. It's like we get married and then that marriage is going to end. We don't know when, we don't know how, and we don't know who. But knowing that your lawmakers have decided what's going to happen in those moments kind of brings a different spin to it. It's like, wait, we know each other. We know our circumstances. We love each other. We want to spend the rest of our lives together. Why don't we decide what these things would look like should they happen based on our particular situation and have some say about it instead of having people who've never met us, don't know anything about us, decide it for us.
And then also to have maybe this big elephant in the room for your marriage where you're afraid to talk about finances. You don't know what happens at your death or your spouse's death. And it's just a big question mark that everybody sort of treads carefully around when it really is such a critical part of your life and your future is understanding what your financial stability will be and what you are required to maintain on your own and what you can expect to receive from your partner.
Yeah, it's really about overtly stating expectations and being really clear about them. So everybody's on the same page about what this would look like. And when people come into marriage, there's so many things that we presume or we think is going to happen or we expect will happen. But, because I work with so many step families, there's a lot of second marriages, third marriages, and there's previous promises to prior children, former spouses. And those obligations are part of sometimes marital dissolution agreements, right? So coming into your new union, it's really important to be very clear with each other about are there resources that you might be able to blend together and what are already called for in other areas too. So it's so important for couples to be in reality about their financial situation before they get married and who they are in relationship to money. And I think you're aware of this as well. Like the main reason why couples are citing as their reason for uncoupling, for divorcing, it has more to do with money now than ever.
So financial infidelity as opposed to romantic infidelity.
Exactly.
I'm acting like I know that. I know that from you, from listening to you on other podcasts. So when I heard it for the first time, I was surprised, but then it made sense when I think about the people and relationships I'm aware of in my life and what have been the struggle points. And often it is financial. Why don't you just describe what financial infidelity is?
Yeah, we think about like when somebody cheats on you, right? It's typically from a romantic, intimate, sexual reason, right? And
right.
money is kind of like the last taboo, right? It's this area where we don't have a lot of skill in talking about it. We don't feel comfortable talking about it. If it doesn't go well, we tend to avoid it. And then we end up doing things that we choose we want to, or even if we have an agreement with our spouse that we wouldn't do it, or we would talk to them first. And that can really jeopardize a relationship. And when people take out a credit card without telling the spouse and running up a lot of debt, or second mortgage on the home and not tell the spouse, and like really significant things can happen. And it could be a small thing like going on a shopping spree and hiding your next Louis Vuitton bag, or it might be you've promised that you're not going to make purchases over, I don't know, $500 without talking to each other first. And then you go out and you buy a jet ski. It's like, and these things add up, and it really erodes trust in the relationship. And couples will come apart because of that breakdown in trust. And it's a lack of being able to talk about it and have agreements that really take care of each other, and having your money in a way where you can have some freedom in terms of self-expression, but then not jeopardizing your relationship.
The analogy that you gave in your book about building a home and having a really strong foundation, preventing any cracks in the foundation by building it in the appropriate and open and honest manner versus kind of hiding things from the beginning and starting off on a foundation that maybe has a few cracks in it that just get worse as time goes on. And maybe it's not because you're incompatible as a couple. Maybe it's because you failed to have the necessary conversations to grow a strong marriage. So in the context of having a prenuptial agreement conversation, really, regardless of whether you end up signing a prenup, I think that you've been advocating to have these conversations in advance, regardless of what your legal intention is, simply because having these conversations is so important for building a strong marriage. So how would you even start those conversations?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I'll start by saying what not to do. So
perfect.
One of the ways that those cracks in the foundation can happen is how the prenup is handled, right?
Oh, exactly.
If somebody tells you you have to have a prenup, or you're treated in a way where it's like an in-law being treated as an outlaw by the family, like especially if there's significant wealth, or like you said, a business, or there might be family holdings, and it's like, no, you're not allowed to have this. You need to sign this saying you have no rights to it, that sort of thing. Again, it sets up this kind of negative orientation towards somebody that you actually need to onboard and become a part of your family, because they're going to be possibly the parent of your grandchildren, or they're going to be really influential with your son or daughter. And the reason I wrote the book, and I'm so passionate about this, is because I've worked with like hundreds and hundreds of families with family businesses. And when I would interview these spouses that had married into the family, this was the number one cause of pain that was enduring, and it created resentment. And it was maybe years later that when I would ask them about, tell me about the family and what I should know, invariably the prenup conversation would come up as like how they were treated, how it was handled was just awful for them. And it really tainted their relationship with their in-laws.
So I would imagine that in a lot of those situations where there is resentment, that the idea or the concept of the prenup maybe wasn't given appropriate context or appropriate emotional grounding. And I had read that you talk about first dealing with the context of the prenup versus the content of what is going into the prenup. Could you describe that, what you mean by that?
Yeah, so the little book I wrote, The Beginner's Guide to Purposeful Prenups, is all about how to have the conversation. And it doesn't go into any technical detail about what you need to be talking about. What you need to talk about, there's lots of information that you can get from attorneys, from books, from other podcasts that are more technical. But my big push is the context. What is the quality of the conversation? How are you talking about it? What happens internally with your emotional state as you're having the conversation? How do you manage and emotionally regulate? So I like to give this framework of really thinking about it from a loving perspective, building trust and acknowledgement, like really appreciating. And these qualities of gratitude for each other, for even being willing to have the conversation, These sorts of things help to strengthen a marriage because when you are able to navigate emotionally charged situations and conversations about the most painful, difficult things that we can talk about, right? Death, divorce, money, it's really fraught. But if you know how to do that and do it well, you know that you're unstoppable as a couple, right? You can handle anything. You can talk about anything. It's a safe thing to have these conversations. And that's what you want to build, is that skill to be able to do that. So the context is all about what's the reason we're having this conversation? For the sake of what are we wanting to explore this? And who are we as we're having the conversation? Are we loving and supportive and looking at each other? Are we feeling defensive or aggressive? Are we not being completely truthful? Like, do I not trust myself in having this conversation?
So the conversation, would you recommend having it just the couple or with a facilitator like you? I guess I could imagine a couple trying to do this on their own and then maybe feeling a little bit lost.
Well, I love it when couples try it on their own first to see how they do.
Okay.
And I just give them recommendations for like just starting with your memories, your history about money. Like, what are some of your earliest memories about money, and how is money handled in your family? And what are some like meaning that you've made about money as a result of what you heard or what you saw or what you experienced, how something was treated, like when you were caught shoplifting or taking some money, like whatever it might have been, so that you start talking about things that have some emotion to them, but are in the past, right? We can't really change anything from the
Right.
past, but we can bring that forward, which creates more intimacy with each other anyway.
So starting with the childhood relationship with money and your family's relationship with money, that seems like a really safe place to start, because it's not saying this is good, this is bad. It is just how I was raised.
Yeah, exactly. And what were like the idioms or the phrases? Money doesn't grow on trees, or what do you think, I'm made of money? Like, what were the things that were said or not said about money? Or what do you remember? And that helps give that context. Like, oh, when we're having a conversation today, here and now with each other about money, all of that historical background is there, right? It's all part of who we are. It's shaped us. It's oriented us in a certain way. And just knowing that can allow for more empathy and more understanding. And then I also really recommend creating the greatest likelihood for success. So a couple things right out the gate is, if you're going to try and start talking about money and marriage and bring up the prenup conversation, don't be under the influence of substances. A lot of people think, oh, let's have it over a bottle of wine, or let's go get stoned and talk about it. It's like, no, you want to make sure that you're not, because you want whatever's happening to be authentic and trustworthy. And when there's other influences at play in our thinking and our conversation, we can always say, oh, no, I didn't mean that. I was drunk.
I was under the influence. Okay.
So there's always like kind of this weird default that we can have as a result.
Yeah, that wasn't me.
Even though it might make us more comfortable physically to have the conversation because we're able to manage our emotions differently, if we have some substances in us, I don't recommend it. What I recommend is going for a walk, standing side by side, going in the same direction together, right? You're talking about your future together. It's not easy or comfortable. So getting the body moving can be really helpful, because when it's still, we can tend to hold our breath, get contracted, really hold down on things. And it can make it so that your ability to access the part of your brain that can come up with creative solutions is not as easily accessible. So moving the body and being in nature, if possible, can be really helpful. It helps with a more of expansive view. And I always recommend starting out with how much you love each other, and having the prenup conversation be for the sake of each other individually as well as a relationship, right? It doesn't have to be, I win, you lose. It can be, how do we both win? What does this need to look like so we both have our lives and our quality of life considered, given the different ways that we're coming to the relationship with?
I want to go back to the childhood conversations, just because that seems like a really safe place for couples to start. And when I heard you on another podcast, and I think you might have said this in your book too, you talk about almost everybody has that experience where they've stolen something.
Mm-hmm.
And when I heard you say that, I thought, oh, I'm not the only one.
Exactly.
I've had this shame. I'm 43 years old and had this shame for something I stole when I was 3 years old.
That's a long time to carry that.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever shared it with my husband. We didn't have the prenup conversation. But when you said it, it sort of took down this barrier of, oh, okay, so other people have done these things that as little kids they regret. And to include that in the prenup conversation, it seemed like it could be really, really powerful. When I was 3, I was in a shopping mall and it was the winter and I saw some bracelets that I liked. And so I put them in my winter hat. And then I put the winter hat on my head and I was not super stealth about it. So I did get caught. And I was thinking about it this morning while I was listening to you on actually your own podcast talking about prenups. And I thought, this is such a bizarre thing for me to do because I don't really even like jewelry. I don't wear a wedding ring. And for me to that be the thing that I've carried around for 40 years, having stolen these, well, I didn't get away with it, these bracelets, it just seemed so silly. But I could think that there are couples out there who might be embarrassed to admit that to their significant other. And I think that that's a really good kind of icebreaker for those conversations where, yeah, we all have done things that we're not proud of. And what we've done in the past is not necessarily an indication of who we become.
Yeah. And so much is related to how it's handled, right?
Right.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's such a universal experience. Children learn about life, morality, money through taking things, through wanting something and going for what they want, even when there's a rule that they maybe know, maybe don't know about what they should or shouldn't do. And it's all about how the adults around them handle it that can really have an impact on the degree of shame, guilt, or even like lasting effects. I mean, who knows? Maybe you absolutely love shiny, wonderful jewelry, but after how that was handled, you're like, oh no, I'm not going anywhere near jewelry. You know, who knows?
Well, I don't think it was handled poorly. I was with my babysitter and I do remember that I was, crying a lot. She was not yelling at me. It was simply a conversation, but I was so ashamed. And
Oh yeah.
she promised that she would not tell my mother. Of course, she told my mother because, my mother should know what I did, but my mother wasn't concerned considering, my other behavior. And I do remember as a teenager telling my mom that I had done this when I was 3. I just needed her to know. And she said, yeah, I've known since you were 3. It's okay. We've moved on. We've all moved on.
But it's such a great example, right? About how a moment in your life really had that kind of impact on you.
Mm-hmm.
And, even still, it's like, oh, I don't even know if I told my husband. And, shame is such an incredible emotion. It's very insidious and it really can wrap itself around our hearts. It can really shape how we think about ourselves and the world and what we can and can't do or what we should or shouldn't do. And it's so important to be aware that what we think might be so and true and the meaning that we made as a child, it might not be as bad as we thought, and it might not warrant the level of personal mea culpa that we can often feel around something.
Right. And it's funny, I just realized this necklace I'm wearing, I don't even shop for jewelry. I just don't really have any feeling towards it. But this necklace was purchased by my babysitter that day when I stole the bracelets, and she gave it to my mother. She gave it to my mother, just before my mother died. And now I have this necklace, and it is so funny that that is what I chose to wear today, not knowing I would be talking about that story. But I do think that my mother and my babysitter, I think they handled the situation very well. I was very hard on myself, but not as a result of how they behaved towards me.
Well, I just think you're absolutely demonstrating right now the power of being able to have these conversations and, what's unfolded. I think of it as like a lotus flower. Like, it's like you start to share and something that's felt really shameful or whatever, it's like really tightly closed and it's inside and it feels like it's dark, right? A lotus grows out of really mucky, dark things. But then just having this conversation and being willing to have it, it opens up and it's just beautiful. And oh my gosh, I just got to be connected to your babysitter and your mom and the story about your necklace that you wouldn't have even thought about. And that's what creates that connection and intimacy and strengthens relationships the moment we choose to have that. And we might as well find out how the person we love that we're getting married to responds and reacts to some of the things that we think are kind of dark or icky about ourselves
Yes.
before we get married.
I'm going to tell my husband about about this later so that
I'll have to know what he says.
Yeah, we're fully honest with each other.
And here's the thing, like I can tell like 99% accuracy that he's going to have a story for you.
I imagine he will. But what would be a red flag? If a childhood, theft incident, probably just fine. But what types of reactions or stories might give us pause?
Yeah. So if there is a childhood story about taking something, but the person talks about it with a lot of pride, no remorse, no sense of, boy, did I learn a valuable lesson, but more like, yeah, it started me on a real streak of just taking whatever I wanted. Pay attention. Like it might have come from like really humble beginnings and where they had no other way of getting what they needed except by taking things. And it's like, wow. And then have they shifted to giving back now? And are they really philanthropic to like homeless shelters or things? Or are they still, taking and, it's every man for himself. And like, you can learn a lot about how somebody orients themselves to it. The other is, when you're having conversations about money, prenup, when you bring up some of the content, right, around divorce, there's a lot that can happen for somebody in terms of fear and control and power. And seeing how your beloved, your betrothed, the person you're going to marry, moves in the world around those things is really important because that's how they're going to be in your marriage. Do they have a very hard stance? And is it my way or the highway? Do they have a way of completely avoiding, deflecting, and not talking about things that they're uncomfortable with? Is there a sense of trust between the two of you to be able to talk about these things? Or is it like, oh, we really can't go there? And you're already starting to develop what I call those invisible fences.
Mm-hmm.
You know how a dog can wear a collar and it'll shock them if they get too close to where the invisible fence is? Well, we find out about those in relationship. Oh, we can't go there. Ooh, nope, can't go there. You got to look at like how narrow is it already before we're even getting married in terms of what we can and cannot talk about. And then the other is your own reaction. Like, how are you with your beloved that you're going to be marrying when you're having these conversations? Do you feel really comfortable and at ease and able to talk about these things really easily? Or is there a lot of hesitation? Is it like, oh no, this could go really badly? Like, you want to pay attention to those things and find out like, who are we as a couple talking about difficult things? And I would say the facilitator comes in if you don't do it well.
Okay.
You find that the conversation is just not going well, or every time you try to bring it up, it ends up in a fight. That's when you need some support, a mediator or a coach or somebody who can really help you understand what are the maybe childhood beliefs or patterns that are getting triggered between the two of you that make it so hard to have the conversation so that you can have new ways of approaching it.
What if the situation is you've got one partner who is a saver and one is a spender? Are they doomed, or is there a way that they can manage that?
No, you just need to be in reality about it, right? I worked with one couple, phenomenal couple. They loved each other dearly. And she was a big saver and she was really smart about her money. And she came to the relationship with an inheritance and she was really happy to share and, help build a life together with him. But he was really into the next big thing and taking lots of risks and having a lot of debt. And he had no problem with it. He was very comfortable with it, but she was very uncomfortable with it. So their whole prenup was around wanting to make sure that she would never be responsible for his debts should they not stay married. And that she'd already kind of set up an understanding that she had paid off some credit cards for him and some things. And she was like, I need to change this trajectory because I'm so not comfortable with debt. And I don't want to, be required to give him spousal support that's just going to keep paying for his debt. That's something I can't do. So they weren't able to sign the prenup. Like, it was really difficult for them with their mediator. So they found me and we did some really amazing coaching around it because, she came with a financial bank account that was in the black and she had significant resources there, but she had some depression. So her emotional bank account was kind of in the red and his emotional bank account was overflowing. He was like the most loving, empathetic, compassionate, emotionally intelligent man I've met in a long time. And he was able to make her smile. He was able to pop her out of moods. Such a treasure in terms of what he was able to bring to the relationship. But he was always in the red financially. So we talked about the value that you couldn't like put a dollar sign on in terms of the emotional side, but that he was bringing a lot of value to the relationship. And they were able to come up with a really creative plan for their prenup that involved her giving him a gift that was calculated out in a way that would have held up in the courts in their jurisdiction. And she did it as like a preemptive spousal support. So she did that after they got married, she gave him the gift and that was his. And then he signed off on never requiring or needing spousal support. So it was a really interesting solution they came up with.
From a legal perspective, one thing that always worried me is when someone would call and say, I'm getting married in 2 weeks, I need a prenup. And I would say that prenup is not going to work.
No, that will not hold up in any court. No.
One of the legal considerations for thinking about a prenup is that you've had appropriate time to think about it and to understand it. How far in advance of getting married would you suggest is a good time to really start having these prenup conversations? And again, regardless of whether you are actually going to be signing a prenup.
Yeah, so many couples focus so much on planning the wedding.
Yes.
And I find it's actually a really great way to ease into the conversation because you're ending up having to make a lot of financial decisions. And even if parents are paying for it, you're still aware of what the budget is and what you're paying for and like where your values come into play around that, right? Like we love music and dancing, so we want to have the best band. We could care less about the linens. Like it's like you get a chance to see where you're on the same page as a couple around your values when it comes to what you want to spend on and what you not as important to you. And then you can then dovetail that into what I call marriage dates. So you're having all these wedding planning conversations. And I just recommend once a week, wedding free zone. You're not going to talk about the wedding at all. And you're going to talk about some aspect of the marriage. What do you want? What is all this for? And what are you looking forward to? And then as you keep developing those, then you would have one of those conversations would be, since we're getting married, let's learn about each other and our relationship to money, because it's going to be like one of the most important things about our marriage. And let's start with our childhoods. And so you start having that and really dive into there. And then the next one would be, what are the values that you hold most dear when it comes to money? Like, the saving versus spending. Like, I need to have freedom or I need to have security. Like, really talking about those things and finding out, like, where are you on the same page? Where are those different? And then with that in mind, then you can look at, how do we want to structure our finances in our married life so that you can always have that sense of freedom and I can always have my sense of security, right? So,
right. And it's not an all or nothing.
No.
Not an all or nothing endeavor. It's not we keep it 100% separate or we put it all together. You can individualize what works best for you. I do wonder if you're in a couple and you're having these conversations, you are engaged, the wedding date is set. What if you get this terrible pit in your stomach that, I'm seeing a lot of these red flags? What would you suggest?
Well, I had that in an engagement I had. So personally, you do not want to ignore that.
Okay.
If you have this thought of, wow, I mean, mine was, I don't know, he kept saying different things. And I was finally like, when we're at the altar and he says, I do, I'm going to be like, do you? Like, it just didn't add up. Like some things were like, he's struggling with this. So we found a marital and family therapist and we ended up working with them. And it was clear that it was not a good idea for us to get married. And I'm so grateful because after you get married, it's just really hard to unwind it. And
so you had already set the wedding date.
Wedding date was set. We hadn't sent out invitations yet. We sent out a save the date.
Okay.
And we had started to make our plans for it. And then it became pretty obvious that it was not the right thing.
And you survived.
Oh, yeah.
You canceled the wedding and you survived.
So grateful. Yeah. I more than survived, right? I want to be married to somebody where it's like easy and it's like wonderful. And it's like, yeah, of course we want to be together.
And I think a lot of people feel that pressure that, everybody's expecting us to get married. But at the end of the day, it's your life. And everybody really wants you to just live your life in the best way.
People really love you and they want you to be happy. And if you get a sense that, this isn't going well and I'm finding myself with some dread or I'm finding myself with some real concerns or doubts, you want to take those seriously. And sometimes it's hard to pay attention to those because you are in such a momentum towards the wedding, but pay attention to what your body's telling you, right? Like, how are you sleeping? How's your stomach? Are you breaking out? Like, it might not just be the stress of planning a wedding. It might be like your body might be trying to tell you something. So
Exactly.
It's important. I think that's why the marriage dates can be so helpful, because you get to see like who you are as a couple in the midst of what can be kind of a stressful time. Even though it's really joy-filled, it can be stressful. And then you get to see, oh, maybe we're not so meant to be together. Maybe we're better off, loving each other, but not sharing our lives together, And I've spoken to many attorneys around purposeful prenups, and they're like, this is such an amazing resource that I bring to my clients, because when they choose not to get married, it's such a godsend for them, because it would have been a nightmare for them on the other side of it. So,
right. It's much harder to unwind a marriage than not get married at all.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So if anybody is wanting to connect with you or learn more, can you give us that information? But also, as one of those connecting points, can you tell us about your podcast, Wealth Coherence?
Yes, because this is going to be there too. Anybody can find me at emilybouchard.com. I just made it really easy. LinkedIn, I'm pretty active there. I mean, that's how Jill and I connected. I listened to one of Jill's podcasts without knowing Jill, and I was so blown away by it. And then when we connected, I realized, that is Jill? I was so excited. This podcast on death readiness is one I recommend all the time.
Well, thank you.
I think what you're doing is so needed in terms of helping people have these conversations. And obviously, I'm totally passionate about that and feeling able to have them, right? Like, you give enough information, you give enough ability to be able to say, hey, this is important. We need to talk about this and have it go well. So yeah, thank you for inviting me. And I find that if somebody's like intrigued by this topic or other topics that you bring up on your podcast, like sharing the podcast with your betrothed is such a great way to get started. Like, I want us both to listen to this and then have a conversation about it, because it can help to open up a whole conversation that you might not necessarily know how to start otherwise. So.
Yeah, exactly. And I think each half of the couple listening to the conversation on their own time and in their own way, and then coming together to have the prenup conversation or those, marriage dates in anticipation of getting married. I think that's really useful. And listening to you talk about prenups, although I'm already married, I did have a lot of takeaways about helpful ways to have conversations about money, not just with my husband, but with my daughter, who were teaching how to manage her finances and the difference, spending and saving and budgeting. So just opening up the money conversation, I think, is a real service. And I thought I knew how to do it, but I certainly learned more reading your book and listening to you speak on the subject.
Oh, great. I'm so happy to hear that.
Well, thank you, Emily. Thanks for joining today.
Yeah, thank you. This is wonderful.
If this conversation gave you something to think about, please share it with a friend or family member who might find it helpful. Have a question after listening to this episode or any episode of the Death Readiness Podcast? You're probably not the only one. I'd love to include your question in a Tuesday Triage episode, my short, bite-sized series where I answer real questions from listeners like you. Just send an email to jill@deathreadiness.com or submit your question at deathreadiness.com/Tuesday Triage. I can't wait to hear from you. In the next guest episode of the Death Readiness Podcast, I talk with Carrie Alterman, daughter of Holocaust survivor Emery Grossinger. Emery survived multiple concentration camps and lost both of his parents in the Holocaust. He turned 13 on May 8, 1945, Victory in Europe Day. Carrie shares the story of what her father experienced during the Holocaust and the most powerful gift she received from him: his name, his integrity, and the values he lived by. It's a powerful conversation about the kind of inheritance that can't be measured in dollars, but can shape generations. This is Death Readiness, real, messy, and yours to own. I'm Jill Mastroianni, and I'm here to help you sort through it, especially when you don't know where to start.
Hi, I'm April, Jill's daughter. Thanks for listening to the Death Readiness Podcast. While my mom is an attorney, she is not your attorney. The Death Readiness Podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. It does not provide legal advice. For legal guidance tailored to your unique situation, consult with a licensed attorney in your state. To learn more about the services my mom offers, visit deathreadiness.com.